Now shifting into the hip. Remember when we talk about the hip during our discussion, the hip is the hip and low back, and the hip and the leg and hamstrings, right? They're kind of all interconnected. So if somebody has low back pain, you'll work on the low back and you'll work on the hips. If somebody has hamstring pain, you work on the hamstrings and the hip. So if somebody has hip pain, you work on the low back and the hamstrings. These three areas are strongly intrinsically connected. So keep that in mind. However, for the demonstration, we're going to be focusing just on the hip, and we'll go into the hamstrings just a little bit. So the hip is largely governed by the urinary bladder meridian and the gallbladder meridian, and its main function and action is to stabilize us during walking, to extend the hip. It's essentially all about locomotion, keeping us in movement, right? It's quite a common place for people to be sore and uncomfortable, and we talked about stress. Stress is held in traps and in the hips. So what you'll find a lot is people have incredibly tight hips even though there's really no reason for it. Maybe they're not athletes, maybe they spend their day kind of sitting around at an office. But even so, because stress is kind of stored in the hip, we could say, it's not unusual for them to be very sensitive. The next thing to keep in mind is the superficial muscle, glute max. The deeper muscles are going to be our glute med, and our external rotators. You cannot access the deeper tissues until you firm or completely relax the superficial muscles, glute max. And then as you're working, if you're going towards those deeper muscles and you move too quickly and the glute max tightens up, that means you have to back up and start again. Gradually go superficial to deep. So when you are working on the hip, this is a really good time to emphasize slow progression from superficial to deep. All right? So the main points we're going to be working on are going to be urinary bladder meridian, which is going to be more the 3 cm line than 1.5 cm line, so in line with the scapula. We'll also be working on GB30. Find those points specifically. Let's start with our superficial techniques and go to our deeper techniques. Whenever we go to work on the glutes, we ask permission. Even if you've gotten them written consent beforehand, as you work in the glutes, you say, I'm going to work on your glutes now. Is that okay with you? Good. So, ask permission. Now, when it comes to body mechanics and posture and how we use our body, you'll use open fist, back of the hand, fingertips, thumbs. You will not use the palm of your hand. I can use the palm of your hand on somebody's glutes. It feels uncomfortable. It's very easy for them to interpret that as crossing boundaries. So I'm going to start with loose fist. So loose fist will stand at the side of the table in a nice easy horse stance. I'll just use a loose fist pushing along the glutes. I can use the back of my hand as well. You don't have the option. So the reason I want a top sheet is we can certainly work over top of clothes, but when we're working over top of pants with jeans or with pockets, it can be uncomfortable on my hand. So if I just put a sheet down, it's a little bit easier for me to slide. Yeah, that's much easier. So this technique I'm doing, I'm not pushing very hard, and you see the motion is coming largely from the shoulder. But if I feel any discomfort in that shoulder, I'm going to stop. And the motion, if I were to slow it down, is pushing along the glutes. Right? So it looks like I'm just twisting it out, pushing along those glutes. This hand can be support. Okay? And I'm paying attention that at no point in time do I feel the glutes tighten up. Now the next technique I'm going to move into is kneading. Now when it comes to kneading, standing at the side of the table again, I'm just going to use some nice loose fists. I can use my knuckles as well, depending on the size of your hand in relation to the size of their hips. I'll just knead. When we knead, we can use one hand too, right? Kneading is different than pushing because we're not moving over the skin. We're moving the muscles under our skin. Okay? What I really want you to do this time is focus on what you're feeling, right? Just imagine the tissues and the muscles underneath your hand instead of just kind of like getting lost in the movement. Really try and focus on what you're feeling underneath your hands. Because this is when we start to feel regions of tension. In particular, I'm starting to feel region of tension over here. That's more the lead area of the gallbladder. I start to feel a piriformis muscle itself, and it's quite tight as well. So I'm going to shift now, continuing to do kneading. The pads my fingers. So you see how as I touch, right? The main reason is when I lose contact and I go back in, I'm always going to start contact somewhere safe. Somewhere where I know it's going to be okay. So I'm not just going to jump back into where I was. I start on the sacrum, then I move to where I was. Or I can start on the leg and then move to where I was. Or I can start on the greater trochanter and move. So always start somewhere not directly on the glutes. If you lose contact, and then come back in. It just feels more secure for your client. Right? So I'm just using the pads of my fingers and continuing to do kneading. Now with this kneading, I'm going to be increasing the pressure, working along the lateral edge of the sacrum. Running along the lateral edge of the sacrum. Now I'm moving quite quickly, but of course we could slow down. As I slow down, you notice as I lean in, getting a little bit deeper. Faster techniques, fine, but you're being quite gentle, not accomplishing a lot. You go to slower, you start to feel more, you get a little bit deeper. So, for example, right there, how's that? Oh, yeah. Just keep kneading. Really paying attention to the sensation underneath my fingers. Now, as I get more into the lateral side, right, you see my body mechanics are starting to be compromised. So I can shift my body mechanics, right, or what I can do to make my life a little easier, I can shift her body mechanics. So as soon as I bring that leg out into this position, what you'll notice is the glute med, or the lateral side of the hip, is now facing more towards the ceiling. So I don't need to compromise my body mechanics. Now, if they can't do that, and I'll show you what you do, but since you can semi-comfortably, the same thing, I can do kneading with my knuckles, kneading with my fingers.
Is that position better for getting into the glute med?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I found some really tight bands, so I know where I'm going to be spending my time doing pressing and suppressing. As you know with massage, right, everybody's going to have a different pattern. There's common patterns, right? Most people have a tight band in glute med, most people piriformis is tight. You're going to pay attention to what they need. So, for example, some people, I'll spend a lot of time working on a tight band in the glute max right here, which is somewhere up in ish. For other people, it's going to be not necessarily lying on a specific active point, but lying along the meridian. So the gallbladder meridian in this case is exactly what I'm following. So I'll lower my body position. Now I'm going to be doing my pressing to suppressing techniques. So with that pressing technique, I'm using pads of my fingers, or I'll use my loose fist or knuckles. I'll slowly start to increase pressure. Still. It's going to do psoas. So feeling she's letting me know that she's feeling it more deep in the hip flexors than the psoas. So if at any point in time that sensation gets too much or uncomfortable, let me know, okay? I'll move into suppressing technique. Now when working on the hip with suppressing technique, we do need to go quite deep. So you're going to have to make sure your body mechanics are safe. We can use our thumbs, but I encourage you not to. In this case, the contact surface I'll use is my elbow. Now, all of those techniques I've already shown you we can do with the elbow, right? But with the gentler techniques, I prefer not to because it's really easy to overdo it with the elbow. So once I want to get in a little bit deeper, I'll get to that spot where I felt some tension. Doing okay? Now I'm going to slowly make sure my body mechanics are okay. Tell me when we're at 7. That's a suppressing technique with my elbow. All of the pressure is coming from my body. Now, ideally, we want to feel when that muscle starts to relax, but since I can't feel very easily with my elbow, you'll tell me when we're down to a 4, okay? kind of back off nice and easy, going into some kneading. And I could do that same technique 2 or 3 times. Alright, straighten out leg. So now what do we do if they can't actually get into that position? Well, we could go sideline, right? But that involves switching position. So I'm going to now get as low as I can, standing directly towards the table. Using my elbow is going to be too difficult. So I'll use those fingers that we did last week, right? So fingers together like this, curl your fingers in, find that same spot that we were working on. Tuck my elbows close to my body, and I'll slowly increase pressure. Tell me when.
Yeah.
You recall when a muscle is in a stretched position, it's tender, more and it's tender quickly. But it's in a lax position like we had when the knee was flexed. It takes more pressure to get to tender. So both work up to you. So it's pressing, it's pressing. Now we can do rolling too, right? We can increase our pressure if we're going to back up into superficial. So I'll stand at the top of the table using my right hand, anchoring that knuckle, and I can just roll down with glutes. This hand here is just for support. As you roll, you want to gradually get deeper and deeper. Remember, rhythm is a key component of what we're doing. All right, switch hands. Now, as I switch hands, I'm going to the other side of the table, or the lower portion of the table. Make sure I know where my non-working hand is. Feel there? Feel good? I think we'll leave it at that right now. So work on glutes, and then we'll do the entire leg as one time.